Tonight, organized labor secures 23% increase in public sector base pay, with the minimum wage also going up by 22%, less than 24 hours before the finance minister presents the 2024 election year budget.
I'm happy to report to you that in some few minutes past, after a very difficult meeting, taking the current state of the economy into consideration, that the national base pay be increased.
Already the civil and local government staff union is serving notice. Government must be prepared to pay even more when the next sits to negotiate.
Government upon government, whichever color it is, have always complained no money. They have jobs. But we have resolved that this must change. Next round of negotiations, government should have enough money to even give us double living wage.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Vodafone. It has been 48 hours of intense negotiations with organized labor, demanding 75.1% increase in their base pay. In the end, they only got a 23% increase, with the minimum wage also going up by 22%, just in time for the finance minister to finalize and present the 2024 budget in Parliament tomorrow. The Secretary General of the TUC, Dr. Yaoba, in the last few minutes has been addressing a news conference.
The public sector joint negotiation committee between all unions within the public space under the single spine and government also entered into negotiations to determine the national base pay. I'm happy to report to you that in some few minutes past, after a very difficult meeting, taking the current state of the economy into consideration and also taking into consideration the agreement that as a nation we have with the IMF, and in making sure that we stay on course in achieving all the targets that we've set to achieve for ourselves, and also to get all the benchmarks right. We have concluded that the national base pay be increased by 23%.
Let's get a full breakdown for you. Papani Ashale just returned from that press conference. Is in the studio with me. Let's start with the base pay.
Yes, great. Evan, so for the base pay, this year's agreement is very different. Compared to last year when government agreed to pay 30% increment in the base pay, that was it. It was a flat rate from January to December. Now, this year's own, government is accepting at least a 23% increment in the base pay from 1st of January all the way to the 30th of June. And then from the 1st of July to the end of the year 2024, government will add an additional 2%, will bring that 23 number to 25%. So it's half for 23, January to June. July to December, we have an additional 2% to the 23, bringing the number to 25.
And in terms of real money, people want to see this percentage, how does it reflect in cash? So currently it's at 14 cedis, 74 pesos. It's going to move to 18 cedis, 13 pesos. That is up until June, right? Up until June, from January 1 to June 30th, you'll be now earning the base pay of 18 cedis, 13 pesos. And then from July to the end of the year, it then increases to 18 cedis, 43 pesos. So that's in real terms what it is.
Yes.
Let's talk about the minimum wage, which is also up tonight.
Yes, so Evans, so they also got an increment in the base, the minimum wage as well. But this agreement was reached on Monday. So, but usually in previous years, they would have announced the minimum wage by now. But last year, I can tell you on authority that the negotiating powers from the labor point were chastised. So this year they kept quiet so that the base pay comes to add up to the minimum wage conversations, and it looks as though they've gotten a very good offer at the end of the day.
And specifically, that is gone up now by 22%. Specifically, minimum wage now is a 14 cedis 88 pesos. It's now going to go to 18 cedis 15 pesos, which is what you're going to get. Already today, some of the leaders of the labor unions were talking tough already, anticipating the next negotiation.
Yes, Evan. So you have the likes of Bampoado that is angry that women didn't get exactly what they want. Where did they start from? They started at 70% plus, but they ended up at 23 plus or minus 2, plus 2 after the half of the year. So you'd hear from Bampoado, who is Dr. Bampoado, who is the executive secretary of CLOCSAG.
Government upon government, whichever color it is, I've always complained, no money. They've given us all sorts of reasons. They have jobs. But we have resolved that this must change. Next round of negotiations, government should have enough money to even give us double living wage. And to do that, I think we have to look at the wastage in our system. We as labor, we are not going to wait for another year before we start talking about these things. I think we start talking about these things now. And we have resolved that any which way, freedom must come.
Let's bring in the Deputy Secretary General at the Trades Unions Congress, Joshua Ansah, joins us on the line right now. Thank you, sir, for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you.
And many of your members are anxious to know what really went into the numbers we've just been talking about, considering that you started off at 70%.
Thank you. Good evening to you who are ready to look what happened at the if I start to say, today, just a few minutes ago, the negotiations came to end, was concluded.
Forgive me, Joshua Ansah. We have a bad connection to you. We'll get you on a better line so we can hear you. Of course, if you're joining us tonight, the organized labor led by the TUC have secured a deal now with government that would see the base pay go up by 23% from January to June, and then from July to the end of the year, it goes up a further 2%. That is the base pay. And then with minimum wage will also go up again beginning from January 1 by 22%. We're getting a breakdown of how the organized labor got to agree to that particular deal, considering that they have started off asking the government to give them a 70% increase in the base pay. Government started off at 10% increase, and as of the close of yesterday, they had come to 15%. And now agreeing to a 23% increase in the base pay. We know that the finance minister is going to Parliament tomorrow, and this was essential. It was critical that they got a deal today before tomorrow, so the budget will be finalized, and those numbers will then be factored into the 2024 budget. That is why this was critical. But the concern for some, within Labour is that this possibly could be a government tactic to arm twist, force the organized labor to agree to a number. Well, that number has now been agreed. Is it enough? I want to hear from you tonight. 055-11-11997. My colleague Papani Ashali is with me in the studio. Papani, you were there at the meeting grounds. Who else was there? Who else was represented apart from the TUC?
So, Evan, you have every person from the public sector. You have even security people. I saw people from the fire service. I saw people from the prison service as well. When it comes to the educational front, everybody was there. Tewu, you have Professor Jampo himself there again representing UTAG. You have the likes of Ghana National Association of Teachers as well that were there. And then if you come outside of the educational institutions, you have the likes of Clocksag representing some section of civil servants. And then again, you have representatives from the Public Sector Workers Union themselves. Again, you also have the GAU, that will be the Agricultural Sector Workers Union. So you have everybody from every sector represented in this meeting, a very crucial meeting for them, going into the 2024 working year. You hear sentiment from them that, well, we yesterday heard government say, well, they cannot break the back of government, but their stance is also that, well, we won't break you, but you can also kill us.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Joshua Ansah is back on the line. Thank you, Mr. Ansah. Hopefully we can hear you on a better connection. Great. You were explaining how you ended up at 23% increase in the base pay, considering that you were demanding more than 70%.
Yes, I think I was saying that our meeting ended just a few minutes ago, and the base pay has now been increased by 23% from 1st January to 30th of June, and 25% from July to December 2024. And Evans, you can agree with me that it is not something that Labour will be happy and satisfied with it, but the conditions under which we are negotiating. This brings my mind back when government made its intention to go to this IMF. I think Labour cautioned and warned government not to go to IMF, because whenever IMF is in town, it comes with a lot of conditionalities which does not favor workers of this very country. And today we have all witnessed how difficult we have been the whole day before getting to a conclusion on the increment in the base pay negotiation. This is a signal that when we talk to our government must listen. Because we are fed up with this no money syndrome. And because you're under IMF, the conditionalities will not allow us to do A, B, C, D. I think we need to find a way to end this kind of stories and look for better conditions of service and minimum wage and base pay for our workers in this very country. It is something that we need to take serious. And we don't have to wait until minimum wage negotiations on base pay before we talk about issues in Ghana here. I think a lot of wastage is happening in this very country. A lot of sacrifices that is being made by workers. We don't see that from the government part. So these are the issues I think going forward we need to bring them on board for discussion and ensure that workers of this country also benefit from the labor that is here in this very country.
So you agree to the 23% instead of 70% that you went in with because of the economic challenges we are in?
Yeah, because of IMF and so on and so forth. Because we are all in this country, and you wouldn't want to be the reason why the country will collapse. Even though workers are suffering, but we think that we must all be concerned about the survival and the sustainability of this very country. So, Evans, I think we have all come to conclusion on this for some major reasons that IMF conditionalities does not allow us even to go beyond what we have even tried to reach. Okay, so it is not all that sweet, but what can we do, Evans?
Okay, so you were being empathetic, and of course you wanted, as you've just explained, that you don't want to be the reason why the economy should collapse. But I've heard organized labor say that it's not your responsibility to worry about that, and that it's government responsibility to manage the economy properly so that you get your due. Do you honestly, sincerely believe that 23% reflects your output, what you put in?
Evans, like I said, it's not a good story. It's not a story that you should be jubilating about it, but the situation we find ourselves has put us in this situation, and I will plead with all workers of this very country that is where we find ourselves now. So we need to manage it, and going forward, we need to put in measures that could help us actually achieve something better in our future negotiations. I think it is time for us to be demanding a minimum wage instead of base pay and so on and so forth, so that people can at least make ends meet in a day. As it is now, it is very, very, very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult for us to actually do anything beyond what we have gotten this evening, Evans.
How do you justify that to your members? So how will you be explaining that for them to agree to what you're saying, the reasons for disagreement?
I know it's going to be very, very, very difficult. I know it's going to be very, very, very difficult because our expectation was nowhere near the 23% that we have agreed on. Our expectations were higher than that. And as it has come like this, we expect all the leaders who were part of the negotiations to actually explain the issues to their members. Because it is for the reason that every union was represented there, so that we could all come to one understanding and actually disseminate that same information to our members on the ground. Every union was represented in this public space. So these negotiations was not done by only 2, 3, 4 people. It was done by all organized labor leaders. That is the understanding I want to make. So it is our duty. Once you have gone there to accept something like that, so it doesn't rest with one person or two persons. All the leadership who were there should have the responsibility of explaining why we arrived at such agreement with the government on the base pay.
And then also explain why you have a graduated increase in the base pay. You have a 23% between January and June, and then a 25%, and an additional 2% from July to December. Why is that?
Yes, Evans, let me explain. Let me share this information with you. In the IMF document, it looks as if there has been a figure that has been put there, and anything beyond the 23% will not let the government to have the second tranche of the IMF bailout money that they are expecting. So in issues like this, if it is that will not let them have their money, that will not have them the second tranche of the bailout money. And if it is found in the communique that government has awarded 25% or more to the worker is going to have a problem, then the start rate of the 23%, which will enable government get it a second tranche, should be allowed to get a tranche. Then from the July, in the mid-year review or something like that, so that 2% can be considered, and the 25% will be paid to workers. Evans.
Please stay with me. Thankfully, your friend and colleague, Angel Kabonu, who is the president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, joins us now. Mr. Kabonu, thanks for your time here on Top Story.
Ivan.
Yes, sir.
But once you've spoken to Joshua and myself were on the same bench in the negotiations.
Yeah, I know that, but you represent NAGRA, a very particular group of workers. How are you going to explain this? He just told us that it's the responsibility of every leader now to go back to your members and explain to them and get them to understand why you agree to the 23% increase. How do you propose to do that?
Yeah, okay, well, Ivan, let me state clearly that this salary increase was painstakingly arrived at. It is not a solution to the economic quagmire that our people are confronted with. The general economic malaise is such that one wonders even if one gets a percentage salary increase, it affects our economic situation because every day inflation is moving leaps and bounds ahead of the monies that we have. But let me also say that it's better than what it used to be because today if you are earning 100 Ghana cedis, from January you get in a 23% on that, and then from July it moves to 25%. The solution to the problem is identifying the cause of Ghana's economic situation and finding a lasting and sustainable solution to it. That is eluded Ghanaian politicians. And some of us have the feeling that the Ghanaian politician is just doing try and error with our economy.
However, I mean, I listened to both of you, and I get a sense this must have been a pretty cordial environment. You agree to what government proposed. Government says, well, the IMF won't allow us to go beyond a certain 25%, so take the 23%. And then once we get the tranche, this must have been a meeting of, well, I understand your challenges. You give me what you can, and then let's see what we can do later.
Well, I want to assure you that it was not a walk in the park. It was not a walk in the park at all. And it is also against good labor practice for me to state after negotiations where government started from and the tortuous journey we went through to arrive at it. It is against good labor practice to do that. But I want to assure you that it was not a walk in the park at all. Government did not start from this position. Labor did also not start from this position. But as you negotiate and you move on, you will need to move to a compromise position where you can take something home and government also have a breather within the reality that confronts it.
You think your members will accept that explanation? You know your members. Now that you're going back to sell this to them, you think they'll accept it?
Well, the purse is not in the possession of leadership. The purse is in the possession of the government. Number two, we, the people of this country, the entirety of the people of this country, put people in the helm of our affairs. So it behoves on all Ghanaians to put competent people in the helm of affairs. you know, and in this I'm not talking about any political party, but the consequence of our selection of people to be at the helm of affairs of this country tells on us as a people. You know, so for me, the bigger picture is not at this level of negotiations. The bigger picture is the clarity of the Ghanaian in understanding his or her realities and taking decisions in relation to that. Today, as we speak, every day prices of commodities go up. Now they tell you that, well, if you do not come to an agreement, then we all have to go for labor, for arbitration. When you go for arbitration, I can assure you can be at arbitration for over 6 months. And who loses? It is the Ghanaian worker who loses.
Okay. Well, as it is now, you are expecting a graduated, staggered increase in the amounts going forward into next year, and that is dependent. And from what I just had explained there on the first tranche coming in, nobody knows what's going to happen next year. Next year is an election year. You have the assurances and the guarantees that additional 2% increase from July is automatic.
Yes, it's an agreed position, and they don't have a choice than to implement it.
Thank you very much. That's Angel Kabonuda. He's the president of NAGRAT. Earlier you had the Deputy Secretary General of the TUC also speaking to us about the agreement that's just been reached with government and organized labor. If you are in the public service, expect your salaries to go up from January 1. And as you've just been hearing there, your base pay is going up by 23%. Minimum wage is also going to go up by 22%. But even for the base pay, you can expect a further 2% to go up. I want to bring in Bright Rukubobe, who is the Deputy Minister, Employment and Labour Relations. Mr. Bright Rukubobe, thanks for your time here on Top Story.
You're welcome, Ivan.
Great to have you join us. I know yesterday when we're talking, you said government has started off at 10%. You then went to 15%. Now you've ended up at 23%. How did you get there?
Well, good evening to your cherished listeners. Ivan, yesterday when we had the conversation, I think I was quite optimistic about the fact that we are putting Ghana first, both labor and government. And this is what prevails today. So we are grateful to our partners in this, even though it's not what they wanted. But upon explanation, at a point, the finance minister even had to come in to, put the figures on the table for them to see. So the kind of work we did in the spirit of transparency and trust for one another is what has gotten us this far. So we concluded, as you have said, with 23% pay rise for single spine earners from January 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2024. And then during the media review, we will factor all that into consideration and then move to 25% from July 1st to end of year 31st December 2024.
23% increase. You can afford it?
Well, it's tough because all the permutations that, according to the finance report that were done, 19% would have been very optimum for government. And every percentage point brings an overrun. So this 23% even gives an overrun, figures which I am not even close to mention. I don't know how much overrun. But we were told by the finance ministry that any 1 percentage point beyond 19% was going to translate into some. So the 23%, I am told, even brings a budget overrun like 3.7 billion. And this is huge, you know. So explaining all this to Labour, they had to get as to how finance will be able to finance this is one thing all of us are looking at. And maybe tomorrow's budget, the finance minister may tell us how he's going to finance this compensation line item.
And then you also have to now not only agree with the workers, you have to convince the IMF that this will not throw our program, of course.
Well, on the back of all this, that played a major role. You know, as a nation, we are all in the fund together. So it came as part of explanation, and all of this went into the conclusions that we have had today.
So this is done and dusted. So you have peace of mind at least for one more year.
You know, when this is done, there is also what we call the conditions of service. And base pay rise comes also with pensions. Anytime you pay salaries, it goes subsequently affects pensions. So the 23%, even though agreed, in absolute terms may go more than that, because then we'd have to factor all those things and then pay. So the next stage is now conditions of service, which will also come into play. So the ministry is not resting at all. And you know, next year is election year, and people will use that and come to you, or you wouldn't want to see any strike actions and all that. So it's really tough. We are looking at excuse me.
Apologies there.
Into the year, even though optimistic, we still foresee pockets of challenges which we'll have to deal with.
In fact, there's one already blinking red. The the Ghana Medical Association warning you that by January 1, you should sort out their conditions of service and the working conditions that they laid before you. I know you wanted to get today issues out of the way before you start engaging that. Have you started that already?
Absolutely. In fact, my checks at Fair Wages indicate that they are really working on it. It's tough, but this budget must be read by Finance Ministry. They have a lot doing. And then right after the budget, probably next week, we will be sitting down on this matter and ensure that we don't get to the deadline which GMA has given government.
I'm grateful. That is Bright Rekrubobe. He is the Deputy Minister, Employment, Labour Relations. I want to hear from you tonight. So, especially if you are in a public service, 23% increase in the public sector base pay, and minimum wage also up by 22%, all beginning January 1. And you get a further 2% increase from July to December in the base pay. Is that enough? 055 11 997. News Night starts now.